introduce myself and then I introduce you?
Yes.
Damala, do let us know when we can start, please.
I really wish I could be seeing everybody.
Please go ahead. You can start now.
Marie, please start. Our guests are here now.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our panel, Widows and Climate Justice in Africa. I am the moderator, Professor Marie Ume, and I'm very happy to participate in CSW 66th 50th anniversary session. I would like to introduce our chair, Professor Dr. Eleanor Nwadanobi.
Thank you very much, Marie. Very kind of you to introduce me. Just to say, I'm not a professor yet, but greetings from Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you to our moderator, Professor Marie Ume. Today, the Widows Development Organization, as part of the UN CSW NGO 66 Forum, joins in celebrating the 50th anniversary under the theme, Women and Climate Change. And the Widows Development panel theme is Widows and Climate Justice in Africa. Can I ask very kindly that our esteemed panelists please mute their microphones until it is time for them to speak. Thank you very much for muting your microphone. Now, nearly 30 years ago, 27 years ago to be precise, 4 courageous women, 2 of them widows themselves, came together to start the Widows Development Organization. At that time, the subject of widows and the word widow were considered taboo. There were very few conversations regarding widows. Widows were stigmatized, especially in rural areas and in the context of traditional religion. What did we do? We intentionally named our organization Widows Development Organization with the acronym WiDO, W-I-D-O. That was intentional to destigmatize our precious sisters. When we started in Enugu State of Nigeria, we had harmful traditional practices, including the drinking of the bath water used in bathing the deceased husband. Some widows were forced to lie in state with their deceased husbands. There was the forceful shaving of hair. There was routinized crying. What do I mean by that? The widow would be woken up mostly by daughters of the lineage, otherwise known as Umuada, at specific times of the day, and forced to cry, as if the crying depended on the clock. There was the practice of the levirate, which is the passing on of the widow to the next surviving male in the family. There was property grabbing and disinheritance. The Widows Development Organization was able to document these and more and publish them. We have a member of our board of trustees, Dr. Pat Okoye, who is a keen writer and publisher, and we were able to publish these. Patience Ifejika of blessed memory, a poet and widow, wrote poems regarding her experience with harmful traditional practices. Honorable Justice Angela Otaluka, herself a young widow at the time and a lawyer, brought her wealth of knowledge to the organization. And myself, a doctor, looking at the ramifications regarding the health of widows following grief and loss. Thankfully, with sensitization, with advocacy, we were able to work under the leadership of the National Association of Women Journalists in Nigeria, led by Miriam Menkiti, to get the law passed in Enugu State regarding widows' rights. That was the first law in Nigeria that was then signed by the then governor, Dr. Chimaroke Nnamani. Today, we can proudly say in Nigeria, we have the Violence Against Women, the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act of 2015. You will see that I almost called it the Violence Against Women's, because it started out as the Violence Against Women's Bill and was in the Nigeria Parliament for 14 years, led by the Legislative Advocacy Coalition. 14 years we advocated with the Nigerian Parliament until the VAP Act, as it is known today, which includes protection for widows, was passed in the dying days of the administration of the then President, Dr. Goodluck Jonathan. According to Lois Herman in her write-up recently, she said there are at least 258 million adult and child widows in the world, or roughly 10% of the developing world's female population. And in war-torn regions, the percentage of widows rises to 70% of the female population. We are looking at widows today, first because women are not a homogeneous group. We know that a widow is a woman who has lost her husband, or a girl who has lost her husband. But widows themselves are not homogeneous. We have widows of conflict. We have child widows on account of early and forced marriage. We have widows of the COVID pandemic. We have widows who are not de facto widows. In fact, they are widows of the disappeared, those who constantly look to the gates of their homesteads, expecting their husbands to return because they are not sure if their husbands are alive or not, especially in violent conflict. So when we look at climate change, climate justice, and issues around extreme weather conditions, such as floods, drought, heat waves, desertification, soil erosion, deforestation, etc., etc. Our speakers and panelists today will tell you more about these extreme weather conditions that have life-threatening and profound impact on health. As is the case, the most vulnerable are women and children, especially within populations with internally displaced persons, persons with disabilities, and those with various vulnerabilities. And indeed, widows suffer layers of vulnerabilities. They first of all suffer the vulnerability that comes with the inequality that women broadly suffer. Then there's the layer of bereavement and of loss. On top of that, the layer of suddenly becoming female heads of households. Not to talk of the attendant mental health and psychological impact. Widows, more importantly, are not just vulnerable, but rise above these vulnerabilities as pillars of society and contribute meaningfully to society. But in the context of climate change, these are the same women who lack land and lack land tenure. For 2 weeks at COP26 last year, we were told that 15% only of landowners are women. We had negotiators sitting to determine how to avoid 1.5 centigrade rise in global heating. There was watered down language at the end of the negotiations in talking about phasing out coal, and that language ended up as phasing down coal. But here's the thing. We have a situation where those in low-income countries and communities who contribute the least to climate crisis suffer the greatest impact. What I would like to know from COP26 is how many of the negotiators were widows? How many widows were consulted as the most vulnerable in the context of climate crisis, especially that leading to conflicts? Because when you have climate crisis, there's the shrinking of lakes, there's desertification, there's loss of farming land. That's where you have conflict. How about disaster recovery housing support following loss and damage suffered on account of destruction? COP has told us the conversation will continue this year in Egypt. But there's encouraging news. We're at CSW 66, and my heart sank when I saw the first version of the agreed conclusions, the draft. But then I was encouraged when I saw another version, the 24th of February version, and there might be updated versions that spoke about supporting the elimination of legal barriers to women, including widows. Another paragraph acknowledges that widows and other female-headed households in agriculture and farming communities face various forms of discrimination. There's even more good news that the member states of the United Nations who belong to the Africa group of African states, presented through the Voice of Nigeria on the 15th of this month, a resolution called Addressing the Situation of Widows. Thanks to the advocacy of an NGO called the Global Fund for Widows, we had text that recognizes that all aspects of the life for widows in many parts of the world are negatively affected, and that laws and policies, customs, traditions, practices that act to restrict women, including widows, need to be considered. The NGO committee that has given us the platform today has a paragraph in its recommendations on the elimination of legal barriers to women, including widows. As I end, I also wear the hat of co-founder of the Every Woman Treaty to end every form of violence against women and girls. And we are advocating for a global treaty to end every form of violence against women and girls, including widowhood practices, through legal reform, through training and accountability of lawyers, judges, magistrates, through the provision of services, including livelihood support, violence prevention education, and funding. Dear friends, let me leave you with one really depressing statistic. Are you aware that the entire money dedicated primarily to violence against women and girls amounts to 11 cents per female on earth? 11 cents only. Of course, the treaty will also bring in data and monitoring. In conclusion, widows deserve climate justice. I will now turn it back to our amazing moderator to introduce the exciting lineup of speakers that we have today. Thank you very much for listening. Professor Marie, I think you're on mute.
Just press the microphone next to your video at the bottom left of your screen. Just click on it.
Maybe our web administrator can kindly unmute Professor Marie.
I'm trying. I've asked her to unmute. She's the only one that can unmute herself, but I've asked her to.
Professor, there is a message on your screen. Please click on it.
Yeah. I've asked you to unmute, so just click on it.
All right. While she's doing that, I will ask Ambassador Jane Ebo to please start her presentation. Professor Marie, we will We will get to you shortly when you've unmuted. Ambassador Jane, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, all. Greetings from Jos Plateau State, Nigeria. I want to thank the president of WiDO's Development Organization, Dr. Eleanor Wadinobi, fellow speakers, Professor Cindy Davis Jr., and Mr. Nathaniel, other guests, fellow listeners. Every woman is a potential widow. No matter your age, as long as you're a woman, if you are married, you will end up being a widow, or if you die before your husband will be a widower. So it's something we cannot run out from. And that is why it's a very serious issue and very timely to discuss now. Widows and climate justice in Africa. Definition of terms. Widow. A widow is a woman whose spouse has died. In other words, a woman who has lost her spouse by death and has not married again. Climate is the average weather in a given area over a long period of time. A description of the climate includes information on the average temperature in different seasons, rainfall, and sunshine. Justice is a concept of moral rightness, based ethical rationality, law, natural law, religion, equity, and fairness, as well as the administration of the law, taking into account the inalienable and inborn right of all human beings and citizens, the right of all people and individuals to equal protection before the law of their civil rights, without discrimination on the basis of race, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, color, ethnic, religion, disability, age, wealth, or other characteristics that is further regarded as being inclusive of social justice. Climate justice is defined as ensuring that collectively and individually, we have the ability to prepare for, response to, and recover from climate change impacts and the policy to mitigate or adapt to them by considering existing vulnerability, resources, and capability. In other words, the term climate justice captures the various ways in which global warming impacts people differently and the approach that can be taken to address this problem fairly. The climate justice is the concept of ensuring fair treatment and freedom from any kind of discrimination against the negative impact of climate. It is important to state that climate change will affect different people and places unevenly, and so it's likely to lead to inadequacies within and across nations and between current and future generations, so creating injustice. African widows, irrespective of their culture, religion, or ethnic group, are among the most vulnerable and destitute women on the continent. Researchers have shown that widows in many African cultures are subjected to dehumanizing cultural and ritual practice, passed off as mourning rites. Just like what our president, Dr. Eleanor, explained, what prompted them to start up, how women were drinking water that were used to bath their husbands, chased away, kept plates, using one plate for throughout the time of mourning without washing. One recent one that interests all of us here just happened about 2-3 weeks ago, and it's still trending on the social media. The lady that the husband died, and she was accused of killing the husband, and in this century, she was made to go naked, sack naked, and they took her around the whole village, singing and murmuring and calling her all sorts of names. It's so terrible. It's unacceptable. I'm happy that many NGOs have taken up the case, including Stella Odo, who has paid her personal visit and dropped the 1 million. But what will 1 million do to the trouble, the trauma, the pain she went through? This is a woman who has just lost a husband. You have not mourned the husband, and you are made to go stark naked. You can imagine the harsh weather in the east, in Anambra State. This is also climate trauma, because the weather is so hot and you are made to go naked. Your skin, the sun was burning your skin, and you are made to walk around the street, no shoe, no slippers, nothing on you. So it's terrible what widows go through in Nigeria. How does climate change affect widows? Climate change isn't just changing our weather. Its consequences are daily reality for millions of people around the world. When intense rain falls more frequently, causing flood or drought, which lasts for years, usually women, girls, and widows that struggle to survive and recover from such aftermath. For example, some places, when it rains, the firewood are so wet, they can't even get dry to cook. They end up using the cow dungs to cook. Cow dung is a disease to the health, but women somewhere in Kenya, Sudan, are using it to cook. I've seen them. It's terrible. And the damage to their health is so terrible. Just because as a result of rainfall or flood, they could not stay where they were staying. They had to move. And where they moved, maybe to the desert or so, the only thing they could lay their hands on is just to get those cow dungs. So women and children are more affected when it comes to climate. Below are some of the ways climate change affects widows. Extreme climate change is increased risks of violence against widows. In most parts of Nigeria today, where women widows are being accused of killing their husbands, just like what I earlier said, and in most cases are deprived of staying in the house that their husband built and they lived with. I inclusive went through that. When my husband died, I was asked to move out of my matrimonial home, a home I lived 25 years with my husband. When I refused to move out, they took me to court. My in-laws took me to court, but with God on my side, we won the case after 4 years in a court. So those things affect them a lot. Some are forced to live in substandard houses, in slums and scattered settlements. Most of these settlements can't stand the harsh weather condition and in the long run became vulnerable to widows. Climate change related events, whether slower onset disaster like drought or sudden one like hurricanes or clone, can mean women, homes, and neighborhoods can become uninhabitable. Furthermore, widows may be forced to migrate to camps, living like displaced people, which we have here on the plateau, and Maiduguri, the northeast, where a lot of women, as a result of war, have left their ancestral homes, their personal homes, and stayed in camps, and it's not comfortable at all. Second, climate change increases risks of death and injury. Widows are more vulnerable to death and injury in the face of a natural disaster due to their status. Widows often stay back in a disaster to protect their children in case and end up bearing more risk. A woman will never want to live without going anywhere with her children. If you have watched that film, Not Without My Daughter, it's a film of a lady who was living a place, a bad marriage also. She said not without her daughter. She left and she managed to escape to live with that girl. So widows, no matter the trouble they go through, they want to stay with their children. And stay with the children causes more harm than good because they will not want to leave the children behind. And the process of trying to go with these kids, they run into more trouble. Widows are more exposed to natural disaster as they may not have the funds to secure adequate medication or combat the issue of raising disease that accompany climate change. For example, now in Nigeria, some parts are going through meningitis. A lot of children are dying. And if you check, there are most of them are women that their husbands have been killed during the wars, during the crisis that happened in Nigeria. They don't even have money to take care. And the government are doing, but not doing enough. So when you see all these, women are still those who suffer the more. When there is extreme climate change like flooding, it goes a long way to destroy their land, crops, thereby leaving them with nothing to eat or fall back to. Also, increasing temperature often results in low agricultural crops yield. The issue of food scarcity affects widows. Now, a lot of widows can't even eat. Their farmlands have been taken from them. They cannot farm again because it's said that a woman cannot own a land. When your husband dies, your in-laws take up the land, you are left with nothing, and you have to take care of these children. So I think the government should look into that and see how women should own land in some areas that they are not given the condition to own land. When a disaster strikes, girls can be more vulnerable to child marriage than usually in some places. They are considered an extreme burden in times of crisis, and because the parents, the mother, the widow, does not know what to do. She exposed this child to early marriage. And a girl who is underage, we go into marriage, she's also a burden to herself, because at that age she's getting into marriage, she doesn't even know what to do as a woman or a girl. Widows and climate justice. The climate justice is an evidence-based response to the environmental injustice and harmful in creation of fair policy and strategies to address the impact of global warming by empowering the vulnerable groups, widows, with required legal resources, provision to ensuring necessary funding, and capability to deal with existing discrimination in society. For example, what I mean here, government should make provision for widows and vulnerable girls and children to have money.
Thank you,
Without.
Thank you, Mrs. Jane, for a very powerful presentation. Let us hear from Dr. Sidney Davis.
Hello, my fellow panelists and our guests. I welcome you. I'm Dr. Sidney Davis. I am speaking to you from Boston, Massachusetts. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity and for the invitation to be a part of this panel discussion on widows and climate justice in Africa. I want to thank Dr. Marie Ume for her persistence and insistence that I be a part of this. And I want to thank Dr. Eleanor for her leadership and for the comments that she made that set the tone for this panel discussion. And I also want to thank Ambassador Jane for the very powerful presentation she made. Many of the things that were brought to light from Dr. Eleanor and from Ambassador Jane are going to be included in the comments that I will give in this discussion. When it comes to climate change, when it comes to how climate change is affecting widows in Africa generally, and in Nigeria in particular, we find that there are linkages between patriarchy and the high rate of women's vulnerability to climate change. Traditional beliefs rooted deeply in the culture underpin cultural division of roles between men and women. And they also increase the vulnerability of women to the adverse impacts of climate change. The centralization of activities of women to occupations such as small scale and rain-fed agriculture makes them more vulnerable to climate-related problems than the men. Patriarchy paves way for a high rate of exposure of women to adverse impacts of climate change. Patriarchy equips men with stronger adaptive capability, especially in the area of vocational flexibility and mobility. There is a need to address the undue exposure of women to climate change disasters and the patriarchal and structural issues arising from the confinement of women to livelihoods, which are vulnerable to climate change disaster. There is a significant climate change disaster taking place in the Niger Delta and River State area, where the burning of petroleum products and byproducts are infecting the land, water, and air that redound to climate change issues that directly affect the most vulnerable of the population, women and children. And wherever we find issues that affect women, the widows are like the proverbial canary in the coal mines. They are the ones who are the first and the most affected. A canary in a coal mine is an advance warning of some danger. The metaphor originates from the times when miners used to carry cage canaries while at work. If there was any methane or carbon monoxide in the mine, the canary would die before the levels of the gas reached those hazardous to humans. Thus, widows are, to use another metaphor, the sacrificial lambs of climate change. Patriarchal and male-dominated societies play significant roles in the business of land grabbing, where women are marginalized or excluded and are often ignored. In southeastern Nigeria, for example, land deprivation against women is a major issue. There is a public outcry among Igbo women in southeastern Nigeria, particularly among the widows who suffer untold hardship as a result of dispossession of lands legally and traditionally belonging to their late husbands. Among the Igbos, generally, men are recognized as having rightful claims to lands. This also implies that when a man dies, his belongings, especially landed properties, are appropriated or redistributed among the kinsmen in the family. In some cases, the notion raised is that all substantial property, including the land, belongs to the husbands, and the woman herself is virtually considered a form of property. Land deprivation makes women in general and widows in particular more vulnerable to climate-related problems. Yet a large number of them have little or no choice of occupation besides their small-scale farming. The persistence of land deprivation in Nigeria weakens efforts geared toward women empowerment. Many of the current land distribution and community-based natural resource management schemes contribute in widening the gender gap by ignoring power differences within the household, community, and larger political structures. Furthermore, within the domestic sphere, it is generally considered the duty of a woman to carry out virtually all the homework, which includes preparation of family meals, housekeeping works, nurturing and training the children, and also working on the farm to provide food. Married women take on the majority of the work when it comes to food, while widows and single mothers are responsible for all the labor. In Nigeria, there are few women farmers. The majority of those few women who are farmers are widows. The only way to mitigate climate change is by engaging men and women and having just as many female as male leaders in land conservation and representation and a voice in agricultural interests at the local, state, and national level. There needs to be investigative journalists who are willing to collect stories and narratives of how climate change and climate disasters affect women. women, head of households, and widows. Let me restate that again so I can make sure you get the continuity of what I'm saying. There needs to be investigative journalists who are willing to collect stories and narratives of how climate change and climate disasters affect women, head of households, and widows. The gender equality is essential to be able to mitigate climate change. I am especially indebted to those to whom I have reached out to in Nigeria and in some places in the world that have been helpful in getting the information that I'm sharing with you. This is a short synopsis of the information that I've been privy to and that has been sent to me. I'm very thankful to those who I reached out to who have given me the information that I've requested with regard to how climate change is affecting the widows in Nigeria. And so I want to make special mention of Folashad Johnson of SOARS. She is the CEO and leader of SOARS, I believe an NGO. I believe she may be here with us as one of our guests. And I want to make also special attention to Umata Biafra Worldwide, who are also here as guests. I want to thank them for the information that they have given me that has helped make this presentation possible. And I am wondering, I had put some questions to the moderator and to the chairman in the chat with regard to what the time limit will be for this entire panel discussion, and whether or not we will have an opportunity for any of our guests to ask questions or can otherwise contribute. And as to whether or not there will be someone who will be able to answer the questions that are in the chat. I want to thank everyone for this opportunity. Thank you, Professor Ume, for this opportunity. And I wish all good speed and to be well.
Thank you, Sydney, for your wonderful presentation. And yes, we now have the floor open, the room open to those in the audience who want to ask a question. Dr. Eleanor, did you want to begin with a question?
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Ume. I'm so glad that we can hear you now. The rest of the time will be for our esteemed guests. We do have with us the program officer of the Widows Development Organization. She may have dropped off the call, but we have the first question. Thank you, Alice Fuchs. Oh, with two questions. Thank you for your comment in the chat, Alice. And Alice Fuchs is asking, are there any widows organizations that provide widow-aware training programs suitable for politicians, legislators, and especially municipal officials who are often responsible for distributing social protection to the most marginalized and invisible widows? Jane, would you like to take that question?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Jane. Somehow we can see your hand over your camera.
I'm trying.
Your hand is over the camera at the moment.
The camera, but I don't know.
Please go ahead.
Again, I've tried several.
That's all right. Please go ahead to answer the question if you can.
Please, sorry again. Can you repeat it once again, please. So that
Okay, so basically wanting to find out if any of our politicians or legislators who are the ones responsible for distributing social protection to the most marginalized, does your organization have any training for them?
yes, thank you so much. Our organization quarterly we meet with finding out their problems, trying to educate them to go back to school, those who do not go to school, and those who doesn't want to go to school, teach them on skills to empower them, because if they know their rights, they will know how to face any situation, any circumstances that comes their way. So recently we have been advocating House of Assemblies, the governor's wife, trying to see how they can include widows and women and girls in decision making, because you cannot be taking a decision that has to do with a woman or a widow and she's not where you are taking that decision. Just like in a state here in Nigeria, where one of the northern states, I don't want to call name, a woman is commissioner for women affairs. You can imagine, how can a man be a commissioner for women affairs? What will he say? You know, so we advocate, we go for advocacy visits, and we also get these widows involved to stand up for their rights, go back to school, know the don'ts, the do's, what is their rightful rights, and whereby the husband dies and leaves things behind, we make sure we help them to get those things back, not leaving it for family members, uncles, or in-laws. And we're also letting the legislators to put this in the law that every widow should be given a right, equal right like their men's counterparts. Even at the point of the husband's death, she should not be harassed. She should be given every right as a woman who lost her husband, given the time to mourn. Some of them, they don't even have the time for that mourning. You know, the psychological trauma, the in-laws will bounce on them, asking them to go out. So we are
Thank you very much, Ambassador Egbo. At this point, I would like to add that the Women's Liberation Institute, headed by former Ambassador Minister Kema Chikwe, she does just that. She is training women, girls, their political rights so they can take office, hold office successfully, and make the changes necessary for what we call gender equality.
Thank you very
Marie,
much,
I have my hand
Professor
raised. I'm sorry.
All right, Sydney.
Yeah.
Yes, go right
No, I
ahead.
just want to let you and Dr. Eleanor to know that Folasha Johnson of SOARS is here, and I would like for her to have an opportunity to make her presentation. Give her at least 3 minutes.
Go right ahead. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Sydney. The first hand up here is Chioma Oke-Oma. Then we have Folashade Johnson. So I am going to ask very kindly, whilst thanking and acknowledging the web manager for doing such a great job through Thumin NG. Thank you, you're doing a great job. Is it at all possible, Mr. Damola, to kindly unmute Chioma Okioma, followed by, once she's done, Folashade Johnson. I'm afraid we want to be as inclusive as possible and have very little time, so 1 minute each. Ezewai Chinwe Achalonu next. 1 minute each, please. Can Mr. Damola kindly—
Chioma is here? Shema can start.
Yes, I am here. Thank you very much to all of you. I don't want to waste my 1 minute, but I truly admire what you are doing. Now, I want to take us to sort of think about widows and how widows are being created as we speak. I am not a climate change expert, is not really my area, but we all know how the drought, desertification, urbanization, and conflict interact with our food security, our health, and physical safety. The latter is really very dear to me because that is what is playing out in my hometown, Biafra land. Widows are being created as we speak by invading herders from all over Nigeria and all over Africa. And that is because of climate change. They are looking for pasture lands. As they troop toward the southern part of Nigeria, where they believe they have enough pasture, then their aim is to do what? Take over the land. And by so doing, as our brother Mazi Eluomuno just said, men are the heads of the families. They do all the farmings. So these headers
so very much.
Doing their business.
Can I ask you kindly to let other contributors please have their 1 minute?
Yes,
please?
I will. Thank you.
Folashade Johnson, please.
Yes, so please, as we think about widows, let's think about how they are created and what we can do to mitigate that. Thank you.
Mr. Damola, can you kindly unmute Folashade Johnson for her 1 minute, please?
Over to you, Folashade Johnson. Just unmute your mic, please. Folashade Johnson, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for bringing up this kind of summit. Thank you to Dr. Elena. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Dr. Junior. Really appreciate this that you are doing for widows, most especially women, for their voice to be heard. We'll appreciate that. And thank you for the opportunity given unto me to contribute in quickly to my 1 minute. It's what
30
I really
seconds left. Thank you.
Okay. Mainly, women are to get involved in whatever we do. Our culture is not friendly to women. Like African culture is making a man to be the head and then not getting women involved. We need to do more of sensitization for women to know that they can do it. We're not saying that they should take up the space of a man, but then they could do it. And then when governments are making laws, they should make laws that will support women. Laws that will know that, okay, if you do this to this woman, this is going to be the penalty. And making law alone will not do. When they make law, most time they don't enforce it. There must be a law enforcement. For everybody that break laws or anything that do anything injustice or anything against women, there should be a penalty. They must follow it up and see that there's an implementation. Making law without implementation is total waste of time. And talking about the climate change and how it affects women, it's been said mainly about Dr. Sidney Junior. He actually said a lot about that. But we know that more dependency on others for widows who are farmers, when the climate change, where they used to farm, and then a lot of things happen, and few have been supporting their families through farm produces. And they can no longer do that. They couldn't do that prolonged because of the drought in the recent times. During the last ever rainfall, a lot of women who used to own roadside businesses, as many are unable to raise money for shops. They are affected as the flooding went as far as pulling humans with it. So we have a lot of things that affect our women and affect widows. But most importantly, we believe that all the widows cannot be here, but it's only one that could only stand to speak for them. as I'm speaking, I'm speaking for over 500 widows that are benefiting from our organization, and we know what they go through. We know what we do. What we do mainly is to empower them, at least for them to be able to fend for themselves, take care of their children, look into their education, the emotional aspect, every aspect. But then we still need to look at.
Thank you so much. Very, very passionate there.
And I would
just
just
want to
like
be
to
able to
quickly
give
add
others-
that definitely the Women's Leadership Institute headed by Dr. Kemachikwe, she is going out in the field, sensitizing widows to care for their crops, sell them online, preserve them, and at the present time, climate justice, climate compensation is ongoing with the Women's Leadership Institute working out of Abuja, Nigeria.
Professor Ume, I've been informed that the program officer of WiDO, who dropped off the call, is now back. Is Chiwendu Iheanacho there to talk about work on the ground with the Widows Development Organization in Nigeria, please?
Yes, I'm back online. I was having network issues. That was. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you guys for giving me this opportunity to talk about the Widows Development Organization, which I'm a program officer in Umegwa, Fugiri. So far, I've been with the widows for close to 3 years now. And I know that, yes, the journey so far has not been easy, but I'm so glad to see that with what I'm seeing in their lives now, that there's a lot of improvements. I mean, the widows that I started off with 3 years back are no longer the same now. There is really a lot of improvement in their lives. The women, some of them were jobless before, but right now, I'm very happy to say that most of them are all of them are business owners, and their business now are doing fine. They are now like, their lives are better off now, which was not possible before. And thanks to Global Fund for Widows, with the loan that was given to them, and they are really utilizing the loan and working the way it does in the women. I've seen the enthusiasm in them. They are working really hard to see that, yes, they put good use to the loan that was given to them. And it's really giving, and it's showing a lot of good impact in their lives. I'm so happy for that. And also, I've gotten to see the lives of widows in this Nigeria. It's not easy for them, but so far, with the women I'm managing, I'm glad to say that, yes, there is a lot of good impact in them, and they are so glad, and they are putting more effort. And I'm just pray that this will reach out to every other parts of Nigeria, and so that we'll be having the same testimonies around. Thank you, guys.
I'd just like to share a Shakespearean quote that says, "Destiny is not in the stars, it is in ourselves." So I'm very happy to hear that there is improvement with the hard work of outside organizations, inside organizations, to see that widows thrive despite climate change and climate injustices.
Thank you so much, Professor Ume. I don't know if you can see that we have a hand up from Hope Nwakwesi. We do have questions in the chat. Another one from Alice Fuchs and another from an anonymous attendee. Alice asks, any thoughts from our great panelists as to how marginalized widows can obtain a birth certificate, marriage certificate, and death certificate of their husband? Widows often are prevented from claiming social protection if they cannot provide this documentation. Then we have an anonymous attendee that asks, Why is it that only the widows are stigmatized and accused of killing their husbands? It's about time the male members of the bereaved family are put through the unhealthy practices. Well, I'm not so sure, anonymous attendee, that that's the solution. It's bad enough that widows go through that. And what we're trying to do is ensure that there is dignity for all. We are one humanity. So what we're talking about is protecting the widow, ensuring her dignity, but it certainly doesn't translate to making men go through the same treatment. So I will call on our panelists. Can you answer the question regarding birth certificate, marriage certificate, and death certificate? Ambassador Jane, can you assist us with your experience, please, on that question?
Yeah, I can. Why they seize the death certificate from the women is so that they don't have access to the property of their husband. Like as I told you earlier, I went through that as a widow. When my husband died, my sister-in-law, who is a woman, refused me seeing the corpse. Took the that I should, give her the marriage certificate. As I gave it to her, she took it. I never saw it. But thank God, the doctor who gave the death certificate was a family doctor that my husband have had over the years. So the man had to give me another death. And without death certificate, there are places you can go to and tell them you are a widow. They want to ask you for the death certificate of your husband to know. Sometimes in the bank, sometimes even in the embassies where you go for visa. That experience, the first time my husband died and I went to renew my visa, I have always been a married man. Suddenly I said I'm a widow. The first thing they asked me was death certificate. And if I didn't have it, so they know the implications. That is why they go for it. And also with that death certificate, if you're supposed to work in organizations like companies, you cannot access his wealth, except those who has the death certificate. They feel they are people who are in authority to get it. So that is why uncles or in-laws often go for this death certificate and the birth certificate of the children, wanting to claim the children from you and letting you know that you are not part of the family. You can go just because they want to inherit the properties of your late husband. I think that is why they do most of that thing. I in person went through all that, but thank God I stood my ground and got all those things, because 3 places I went immediately my husband died after 1 year of mourning. The first thing they were asking me your death certificate, and my in-laws have already taken them. If not that I got it. So I think that is why what they do. So like I still said, education is the key. Every woman should try to be educated, to be literate. You might not go to the 4 corners of university, but whatever you are doing, you should know your left from your right. You should know that this is your right. And I also want to bring in here that men should try to write their wills. It does not mean that when you write your will, you die. Every man should write their will, so that at the point of their death, their wife and children should not go through pains. I hear today, the pains I went through, God has just wiped away my tears. If it's before, as I'm telling you now, I start tearing, but God has taken control. My own for another day, what I went through when my husband died. So
I agree fully with you, Mrs. Ambassador Jane Egbo, that will writing is very, very important for husbands to protect their wives and their children. And Dr. Eleanor Unwadanobi did hold a conference, and she did have experts show men and women how to write wills, or if not writing it, at least tell a family member how you want your property and wealth divided. So that is very, very important. Husbands, fathers must write wills. And it doesn't only have to be for your immediate family. It could be for a brother. In other words, you can divide your wealth among many family members, but begin with writing the will. Thank you, Ambassador Egbo.
Thank you also, Professor Marie, and thank you for the grace accorded me in assisting, since I feel you may not see those whose hands are up. Permit me at this point to please call on Hope Mwakwesi, who has been very patient. Her hand has been up for a while.
Sorry, ma, we have someone that's been here for a while. Isn't why Chinwe. Our hands
Thank
up.
you so much.
Yeah.
So SNY Chinwe goes first and Hope Mwakwesi next. Thank you, Mr. Damola, for pointing that out. In turn, please, SNY and followed by Hope Mwakwesi. Much appreciated.
SNY, please go ahead.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. And I want to appreciate the organizers of this program and thank you for inviting us. I'm grateful to be here. Because of time, mine is just questions that I wrote down while we were talking. Yeah, let me just ask my number one question here. Irrespective of the acknowledgement of the existence of the climate change effects and the injustices of the responses of the regional and the state government to ameliorate this effect on rural farmers, how can world bodies like the UN or donor countries ensure that whatever intervention mechanism they are offering transcend to the grassroots or to the widows and the rural farmers? Because I do know that they normally offer some grants, but some people, unfortunately, they don't get them. I have another question here that I want to ask. Have there been really any kind of help from the UN or EU to help Africa rural farmers in the sub-Sahara part of the country to fight climate change effects, justly like the farmers in Europe and other developed countries? And what are those help? That's just my two questions that I have. Thank you so much.
I can answer that question. Yes, okay. The United Nations, through their campaign for sustainable development goals, has offered training for farmers. I think it was in Kenya a few years back, because one of my friends, a chief from Aguta, attended the conference. So yes, training is implemented for farmers by the United Nations through their sustainable development goals, but one has to be aware of it and apply.
Okay, thank you so much. That's for the number one question. I'm asking about if there is kind of any help, any grants they give to all these rural farmers, and how do they know or ensure that it gets to the grassroots, because I know it does not get to people that are supposed to benefit from them. Thank you so much.
Any one of our panelists?
Yes, I think let me answer that. Some of the grants, there are grants anyway, but the process to access these grants are so difficult. And at the end, the money gets to the hands of the wrong people, not the real people who really needed it. And whereby they access it, the really people who have the need does not get it. That is the truth of it. It gets to the hands of those who does not even have need. The people who really have need of this grant does not get it. But in recent time, I think in Nigeria, the federal government, in collaboration with the Central Bank of Nigeria, are running a project, that they give out some grants to farmers. Then some is loan. The grant issue is a minimum, but that of loan is more pronounced and all over the place. Again, to access this is not easy. I know a lot of people are trying to access those loans and grants for the past 3 years. They've not been able to get it the procedures. So if the policies of the government could be so easy for women to access this grant and loan, not just because they are women, but because they are capable, and are women capable, they can see what they've done with the little they have. So if you give them more, they can expand on that. Because every widow, I know a widow that we gave 500 naira to buy mango from a tree. Now she has farms of mangoes and she's giving money to other widows to go to the same business. I learned the program. She said she just needs 1,000 naira. She goes to a tree of mango before it gets ripe and pay up to for the owner and start harvesting it and start selling. So if somebody can make money out of 1,000, no matter the amount you give to her, she know how to manage it. So they should the loan and the grant issue accessible for the widows and the women and girls, young girls who are in business, but money has deprived them from growing because somebody earlier talked about owning a shop, paying for the stores is difficult. And those by the wayside, they are breaking down by doing the roads and expanding. So if we make the assessment for the loans easy, it will be easy. Even those in Niger Delta, like what Cindy said, Delta State and River State, the farmers, the women who farm, who fish, pollution has spoiled the water. They can't even fish again. Yes, I know a lot of them who depend on fishing, women, widows. But now because of the pollution of the river, the waters, they cannot fish. So they don't even have what they are doing. So if also the government can give them grants, they can start other businesses. It will go a long way and make this grant issue easy. They ask you to bring this, documentation, a lot of things. I've also gone through that. It's not easy. I've never been able to access.
I would like to make the point that if the women and the men mobilize and demand from their local government, national government for climate justice compensation, everything will help them get over that hurdle. So the key is mobilization.
Thank you, Professor Marie. We now have Hope Mwakwesi, and I want to find out, it's not often that we have an ambassador, minister, and one of Nigeria's female leading politicians with us. If Ambassador Kema Chikwe would like to leave us with some words of wisdom as we begin to round up. So Hope Mwakwesi, and if Ambassador Kema Chikwe would like to leave us with some words of wisdom, we will request that she be unmuted to speak. Hope Mwakwesi, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I stand on all existing protocols so I don't waste the time. A nice initiative, and I want to say something that I'm glad that the last woman that, sorry ma'am, with all due respect, I didn't pick the name, she made something about that, getting to the right people. And somebody said something about the woman that was stark naked. I had her on my radio show on Saturday. We are still working on her because the truth is that part of the things we do, we have a Widows Protection Bill, which has been included into the DMPP Act. It has gone through the second reading. I can tell you that having experienced it 28 years ago of everything that has to be experienced in Nigerian widowhood, I knew that the first thing we have to do is to have a bill or a targeted at our issue. Because when it comes to widowhood, we have gone beyond. When it comes to climate, I've tried to read, I'm not an expert of that, I've tried to read and bring it down to the experience I have. And the only way I found it was land and the farming, which is key. And the reality is that, for example, I come from Igbo land where that land issue is the biggest issue. They have the UKJ, the discussion is there, but is it implemented? That is where we start. How do we synergize? You know, coming online, educating ourselves of what we do is awesome, but how do we synergize to take it into the citizens, into the hinterland? Because if we did, that is why this woman they were able to go naked. She was on a radio on interview, and it was so pathetic when she listened to her and her story. So how do we synergize? We have a bill there. The only way to synergize, first of all, is all the working NGOs, and CBOs, how do we capture them and know what everybody is doing so that we can replicate and upgrade? That is key. And the second thing is that we have a widows database, which was launched during the COVID-19. The idea of this database is to capture these widows in their community. So even when we're not talking about this grant, we can know where we have the various ages, demographic structure of these widows, so we can go and structure these facilities within their local government, just like somebody said. There is need, irrespective of all these things we're doing, there is need for us now to take it out of here and come to the system town hall meeting, call it anything, and start identifying the various people that are working so that we can go in and educate, inform, and empower the widows and the women in our community. That is the only way to prevent what happened on 2 Saturdays not to happen again. If
Exactly. And that is what our friend Dr. Sidney Davis suggested. If we have investigative journalists who go out in the field and capture these stories, and yes, bring it to the world, put it on Facebook. The Nigerian government will be embarrassed, and believe it or not, we would see a change immediately.
Yeah, I thank you, ma'am, because we've done that a lot. I mean, with 2019, we featured one woman again, the same thing. Even the CNN captured it, and at the end of the day, what do we? But the reality is that until we have more, it is not just we segmentally doing something. Come in together and put a voice showcasing these things, and media, teaching, media, entertainment is the key to get this thing out.
Mobilization is definitely the key. I saw on Facebook on March 8th, women in Nigeria marching, protesting against the assembly, not what we call engendering the nation by appointing female politicians. Again, mobilization is the key.
And because part of the things we experience from before COVID, since 2017, we've been having international widows walk today. And the experience we have had in the villages, because that is from where people call us. It was somebody that called me to send me these women. I didn't even see it on media first. It was someone that drew my attention. People now, there is need for us to synergize and get into our communities.
Thank you so much, Madam Hope. Can we please, because we just have a few minutes left, and Ambassador Kema Chikwe, I see her trying to connect. Ambassador Chikwe, are you able to unmute and please speak?
Okay, I was disconnected for some time. So you have to say something before I speak so I don't get off tangent.
Ambassador, we were saying that it's not often that we have somebody who is a role model for women in Nigeria, a past minister, a past ambassador of several countries, leading the Women's Institute, touching the lives of women and girls, and that we would just like to hear from you regarding your words of wisdom around some of the conversations that we have heard today. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I've listened to the discussions, and I really think they've been quite brilliant, quite practical, and you know, there are things that are happening every day in our world, especially in Africa and in Nigeria, and from the east of Nigeria, where I come from. Now, when as you said, I served as minister, and I served as ambassador, and I served as woman leader of the People's Democratic Party and so on. And, you know, I felt that some of us who have had the privilege of holding positions in Nigeria should give back to the women especially if you have been the first in some of those positions, what you've been exposed to, you have to share with other women, and you have to see how you can help to make things better for the women coming behind you. Now, following with the discussion on the climate change as it affects women, and a lot of brilliant submissions have been made. But what is essential is education. Because like Marie was trying to say, the fault is not in our stars, but in ourselves. Quoting Shakespeare. You know, we since in my younger years, I've been an activist, and we've been repeating the same narrative on women and their conditions and the patriarchy that is the root of our problem, of the problems of women. But you see, the women now have to take the power into their hands, because it's obvious that if you keep saying men will give us a chance, the positions of policy, the positions of power have been occupied mainly by men. And the few women who have struggled to mainstream themselves are doing a good job. But we need a critical mass of women to understand and to, work with each other, to network and do something. Now, in the Women Leadership Institute, we hold master classes 4 times a year, every quarter, on different pathways. Let me use the pathway in agriculture, which we had last year, late last year. And the idea is that women have to first be educated, open their minds. Most of the women who attend our master classes are women who left school years ago. And you have to provide them with the opportunity of refreshing their learning, to go back to the classroom. And they get very excited doing that. And they expose their mind to learn, experience. There's nothing like knowledge. So like the agriculture, the masterclass on leadership in agriculture. After that, some of the women started producing for export, because we worked in partnership with the Nigeria Export Promotion Council. Because you have to have financial power to have your independence. And this is what we try to teach the women. We have a masterclass on leadership in technology. Because some of these women are not familiar with what to do with even their phones. They have their phones. They do not know how to use the phone to do different things. And we had to teach them. You can market online, especially with the pandemic. You advertise your products online. This climate change, the kind of flood we have in Nigeria now is terrible, and so on. So it affects the women who are in business, in their traveling, in their exposure to weather, and so on and so forth. And therefore, technology makes it easier for them, and they have to know, and they have to be able to apply it. We have a pathway in financial management. They have to know how to manage their funds, because whatever we say about climate change, it affects ignorant people more, and there are so many ignorant women, and we have to open their minds and give them knowledge and experience.
Thank you, Ambassador. We have to give them knowledge. In the last 2 minutes remaining for this conversation, as chair, please allow me to acknowledge individually Dr. Adekemi Otolorin, the National President of Medical Women, Dr. Seji, the immediate past, and the EG, Dr. Bernadette Kurubo, Chioma Okioma, Constance Oyolu, Donna Umesi, Chinwe Achulonu, Folashade Johnson, Hadiza Abo, Hope Mwakwesi, Ifeanyi Keke, Jackie Crosby, Jean Anyazua, Joan Ihukumere, Lucy Osuji, Ngozi Ekeleme, Obachi Julius Ogaku, Olufumilayo Abdul, Oyeyemi Afolabi, Pamela Morgan, Patricia Donnelly, Patricia Ejikeme, Susan Lee, Ukweme Okon, Yusuf Rahim, and of course, our amazing Ambassador Chikwe, who just spoke, and our erudite panelists, Ambassador Jane Ebo, Dr. Sydney Davis, the program officer, Chinwendu Iheanacho, and our amazing moderator and UN representative to the Widows Development Organization, Professor Marie Ume. We have been supported today by Mr. Damola of Thumin NG. I'm not sure I pronounced that correctly. And to say thank you to everyone for attending. Our time is now up, but thanks to all of you for registering. I see a comment here from Professor Rosemary Ogu. You will get the recording for all those who registered. Thank you and all the best. And remember, women are not homogeneous. Widows are not homogeneous. Despite the vulnerabilities, widows have a lot to offer. Do not give them fish. Do not even teach them how to fish, but empower them to own the fishing boat. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Thank you, Dr. Mwakanobi.
If you're able to take off, to show your picture, I will ask Mr. Damola to please quickly take a screenshot of those of us in the gallery view very quickly, please. Let's see your faces. Mr. Damola, tell us when you've got the picture of the panelists, please.
Okay, I'm about to take it. Is everyone ready?
Yes, we're smiling.
Okay. Okay, about to happen.
Are you done?
Almost, please.
All right, keep smiling.
Done. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. You will get the
Very
recording.
much, Mr. Damola.
Everyone. Bye. Mr. Damola, you can stop the recording.